Welcome to today's Explainer. Okay, picture this. You wake up one morning, you make a tiny, almost thoughtless click on your computer, and suddenly, you are facing the crushing weight of the entire traditional legal system. Sounds terrifying, right? Well, that is the exact reality we're unpacking today. It's this absolutely fascinating intellectual puzzle where hard science directly confronts the law. We're looking at a completely unique case that really forces us to examine the very fabric of our digital reality, and we're going to do it through the lens of psychology, complex network physics, and of course, the courtroom.
So I want you to consider a highly provocative question. Can a single retweet from an account with fewer than 100 followers actually crash society? Think about that for a second. It sounds impossible, but this is the exact premise at the heart of the case of Dr. Chen. He's an academic whose seemingly minor digital action led to severe criminal charges. The prosecution argued his retweet caused a massive disruption of social order. Facing life-altering consequences, Dr. Chen didn't just hire your standard lawyer. No, he mounted a defense unlike any other. He fought for his life using the only weapons he had: hard science, advanced physics, and psychological theory, basically attempting to dismantle the accusation piece by piece.
Section 1. The micro-action, macro-charge. Okay, let's dive into this. To make their charge stick, the prosecution naturally relies on a very straightforward linear causal chain. It goes like this. Step 1, the defendant retweets sensitive information. Step 2, that information spreads across the network. Step 3, this spread results in severe social disorder. From a traditional legal standpoint, this makes perfect sense. It's built on centuries-old Newtonian logic. If you throw a rock and it breaks a window, your action directly caused the damage. Action A leads to result C. The law relies heavily on this kind of mechanical cause-and-effect argument because, well, it's predictable. But applying the logic of throwing rocks to a complex, multi-layered digital ecosystem, that is where things get incredibly complicated.
Section 2. Clash of psychological motives. Before we even look at the physics of the network, we really have to look at the humans involved, because there is a massive structural conflict in psychological motives here. The source material identifies the defendant's drive as an intrinsic, epistemic motivation. In plain English, he's an academic driven by sheer curiosity, the need for cognition, and the exploration of complex ideas. Think of him as a scientist poking a really complicated machine just to see how it works. The judicial system, on the other hand, operates entirely on extrinsic motivations. Their primary drives are risk aversion, maintaining security, and following authoritative directives. They're essentially the security guards whose only job is to stop anyone from touching the machine. So it's a fundamental mismatch, right? You have an internal drive to explore information, colliding head-on with an external drive to eliminate perceived threats.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is seeing how both sides process the immense stress of a high-stakes trial using completely different emotional regulation strategies. The defendant uses cognitive reappraisal. This means taking a highly stressful, potentially ruinous event and mentally reframing it as an abstract intellectual exercise. And this coping mechanism results in knowledge production, like writing a scientifically rigorous, data-driven defense. Conversely, the system utilizes moral disengagement and relies heavily on groupthink. Under that immense bureaucratic pressure to secure a conviction, there's a real cognitive narrowing. In a courtroom setting, this means decision-makers start focusing only on threat signals. They filter out nuance entirely, creating this closed psychological loop that presumes guilt, basically regardless of the empirical evidence presented.
Section 3. Physics of the social web.
So that's the human element. But what about the environment where the alleged crime actually took place? Dr. Chen's defense brilliantly invokes the CAP theorem. This is a foundational concept in computer science, formulated by Eric Brewer. In any distributed system, like a massive social media platform, for example, you can only simultaneously guarantee 2 out of 3 things: consistency, availability, and partition tolerance. To wrap your head around this, imagine a giant global library where millions of people are returning and checking out books at the exact same microsecond. To keep the doors open, that's availability, and to survive inevitable power outages in certain wings, that's partition tolerance, the librarians have to accept a hard truth. The central card catalog won't always be perfectly up-to-date everywhere at once. That missing perfection is consistency. Because social networks absolutely must remain online, they mathematically must sacrifice absolute consistency. A globally unified, perfectly consistent state of information is literally an engineering impossibility.
And this leads us to a pretty profound realization. What the legal system perceives and prosecutes as chaos or disorder is actually just a structural baseline of the network. It's the standard background noise of any functioning distributed system. Think about your own social media feed for a second.
It's constantly shifting, glitching, showing things out of order. That's not a bug. It's a structural reality. Therefore, claiming that an individual's single action created disorder in a system that is fundamentally engineered to be inconsistent, that's a massive category error. Prosecuting a single user for network chaos is like prosecuting a single drop of water for causing a hurricane.
Section 4. Anatomy of scale-free networks.
Okay, if the system is naturally disordered, how does information actually flow through it? Social media platforms are what physicists call scale-free networks, originally modeled by scientists Barabasi and Albert. These networks do not distribute connections evenly, not even close. Instead, they follow a power law distribution. You might be familiar with the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule, where 20% of causes create 80% of outcomes. Well, scale-free networks take that to an extreme. They function way more like a 99-to-1 rule. They're entirely dominated by a tiny fraction of highly connected hubs. Think your mega influencers, celebrities, official media accounts, while leaving the vast majority of regular nodes essentially isolated.
Just look at the extreme disparity here between the tiny fraction of megahubs that dictate the flow of information and the massive expanse of peripheral nodes. Dr. Chen's account, with fewer than 100 followers, sits squarely in this massive peripheral zone. In the physics of network topology, his account is a microscopic drop in a vast ocean. An account of that size possesses virtually no structural capability to influence the whole. The architecture of the network itself actively limits the reach of peripheral nodes just to keep those megahubs dominant.
Section 5. The mathematical defense.
This brings us to the climax of the scientific argument. We are going to mathematically test the legal charge using Cohen's critical threshold formula. This is a staple of percolation theory. And percolation theory is basically a branch of physics and mathematics that studies how things flow through complex networks, like how water seeps through soil, or in this case, how a rumor spreads through an app. Cohen's threshold specifically calculates the exact point at which a network becomes robust enough to ignore random, localized actions. So, the crucial point for Dr. Chen? It's 0. According to networked robustness theory, random activities at the extreme periphery of a scale-free network fundamentally do not affect the giant connected component of that network. The mathematical probability of a peripheral node triggering a network-wide collapse or a severe social disorder without massive algorithmic amplification by the platform itself approaches 0. The math literally severs the legal chain of causation.
When you translate that dense mathematical proof into plain language, you get this brilliant summary from Dr. Chen himself. My retweet is like breathing out carbon dioxide. You cannot sentence me to life just because the Earth is warming. I mean, wow. This perfectly captures the logical flaw in the prosecution's case. Blaming macro system behavior on a microscopic action without proving the pathway of algorithmic amplification is an absurdity. Just as your single breath doesn't independently cause global warming, a single peripheral retweet absolutely cannot be scientifically proven to cause a systemic societal crash.
Section 6. Science meets the law.
Let's bring everything together. What actually happens when these two completely different paradigms collide? On one side, we have a mechanical, linear legal framework that aggressively looks for a simple A causes B relationship. On the other side, we have the reality of modern digital systems. These are nonlinear, infinitely complex, scale-free networks where localized actions rarely have predictable global outcomes. And this brilliantly illustrates the danger of this mismatch. It's profound. The legal system is essentially trying to govern a quantum-level digital society using 18th century Newtonian tools. It's literally like trying to fix a supercomputer with a rusty hammer. The framework simply does not fit the reality it's trying to regulate. We end our analysis of the source material with an incredibly powerful philosophical conclusion. Power can define law, but cannot modify physical constants. This is the ultimate reality check for institutional hubris. A judicial system has the power to write laws, convene courts, and deliver verdicts based on its own internal logic. Sure, you can even pass a law saying gravity no longer exists, but guess what? The apple is still going to fall. Power cannot bend the mathematical realities of the CAP theorem or the topology of scale-free networks to fit a predetermined linear narrative. So, as our communication systems become infinitely more complex, how must our laws adapt? I really want you to feel the weight of this case on your own digital life. Every time you post, you are a microscopic node in a giant machine. If our institutions continue applying simple, linear logic to nonlinear realities, we risk penalizing the microscopic, everyday background noise of our digital world. The laws governing us desperately need to catch up to the science. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking questions, and I'll see you next time.